This podcast is proud to be part of the TalkSport Fan Network. TalkSport. Powered by fans.
So good evening and welcome to another edition of the Away End. I'm Craig Courtney, and this evening I am joined by Pete from the Watford podcast. Do not scratch your eyes. Good evening, Pete, and thank you very much for joining us. Tell us a little bit about your podcast, but most importantly, the name. Where does that come from? Because it intrigues me.
Well, it comes from a certain Mr. Troy Deeney, who is obviously known in Blue Nose territory. He does have the badge literally tattooed on his leg of you guys. We started, I think, like a lot of podcasts. I wasn't one of the founder members, but Carl and Justin started it off during lockdown. This sort of thing, doing this on Zoom and other kind of streaming allowed them to kind of start to talk about the game that they couldn't actually get to go and see, and I was doing something else, and kind of we kind of joined up. I do animation, and they kind of took one of the animations that I'd started off and put it out, and it all went, and since then we've kind of just joined together as a kind of I was going to say a threesome. That would sound wrong and strangely inappropriate, but never mind. So yeah, and we basically cover all things Watford in a sort of a somewhat kind of conversational, opinion-based, and hopefully slightly humorous kind of standpoint. Because when you follow Watford and you are firing managers about every 3.5 days, since they started the podcast. With the exception of this season, we're coming to you with a new manager. You've got to have a sense of humour about it. Otherwise, you'd just be pulling your hair out. But hey, we're both clubs who know that this is the case. So that's us. And do not scratch your eyes was the goal that Troy Deeney scored back in 2013. We were in the playoff semi-finals. And you will have probably seen it on Sky. They put it out regularly. What's his name? Anthony Knockhart basically found a pocket of gravity in the Watford penalty area that was extremely heavy, it seemed, or otherwise he dived.
There was a ghost behind him that pushed him over, from what I recall.
Well, he dived, got up, missed the penalty not once, but it was double saved. It got cleared up the line, and within 20 seconds, we weren't going. And this was literally with about 2 minutes to go of the game. We all thought we were going out. It cleared. It went up the pitch, and the ball kind of came across, headed back, and a certain Mr. Troy Deeney thumped it home. And we were talking to him about this a couple of weeks ago, as we were just mentioning, and the final part of a 4-part piece that he got, he kind of ended up giving us all evening, basically, which was lovely of him, was looking at just that goal, because he's always tried to kind of veer away from it, because you don't really want, when you're kind of, I don't know, 23, 24, 25, you don't want this iconic moment to define your career when it's in the rearview mirror. He was always looking ahead, and I know he wanted to do that when he came to you guys. So, he doesn't want to talk about it. So this was the first time he did. So we were really pleased about it. But bearing in mind, the podcast is named after his right foot, I think it was reasonable for him to give us a go.
Definitely. And it's, all the teams and groups that I've spoken to so far have started off very, very similar, during the lockdown and the podcasts and keeping people informed really as much as possible, even though there was no actual football going on. And for ourselves, 13th season now for Tilton Talk.
Brilliant, well done, gents.
So we've been going well, growing and growing each time, but we've also now, started doing these with the other groups, and it's been such an eye opener to hear more about the insight to opponents, and I'm really, really enjoying them at the moment. But you mentioned lockdown and stuff, as an example, when we were going through it, we continued doing Tilton Talk, but we had guests every week of ex-players, and that's just kept going really. Just the last show we just had, we had Harley Dean join us
Nice.
to talk about his team at time at Birmingham, and it was absolutely superb, such an eye-opener. And it's, I guess, as you experienced with Troy, getting the insight of what it's like to be a player and what they experience when they're inside the club that they can't talk about whilst they're there, and probably are very limited when they're not, but you still get to have an idea of what they have to go through. But also the camaraderie and family side of every single club. It's an eye opener.
Well, we've done exactly the same thing. The first person that we interviewed, again, Carl and Justin interviewed, was a certain Mr. Tony Coton, who, of course, we came and snaffled from you in the 80s. If you didn't see him,
Oh,
a superb goalkeeper and an excellent interviewee as well. Yeah, and you're right. Former players will give you something of interest, and they're also, when they're a little bit older, and especially obviously if they've left the club, they are more prepared to kind of share a few things and reminisce, because especially if their careers have are now over, it's actually nice for those players to know that actually, you know what, you weren't just playing on the day and that was it. The history of this stuff means something. Everybody who starts supporting in the last 5 years, all the stuff that went on before it actually led to where you are now, and you'll be looking back at this time in the future. So the history is what really makes the club, and of course that's the supporters. So sharing that with the guys who stride it on the grass is huge.
and you mentioned Tony Combe. Yes, Tony is a friend of the show as well, and actually one of those guests that we had on. In fact, we had a bit of a run of what was our, we called them the Crazy Gang. But we had Tony, we had Mick Harford, and a few others joining us across a very short space of time. And when you hear their stories of playing for all of their clubs, it just shows how much, firstly, the game has changed. We were discussing the other night. You put somebody like Mick Harford into a game today, and they were to do one of the tackles like they did back in the day, it wouldn't last 5 minutes on the field. You'd have, people are rolling around before they've even touched them nowadays. So, yeah, it's an eye opener. He was
there was a lovely. He was an amazing keeper. There was a lovely story because, as you say, they knocked around together and they are best mates, to the point where about 8 miles behind me, he basically came. Tony Coton, about two and a half years ago, something like that, came and did an evening with Tony Coton. It was all in basically to raise money for Mick Harford, who was going through his cancer treatment at the time. Now, Mick Harford is now synonymous with Luton Town, and nobody gave a monkeys about that. That night, that's not the important thing, and everybody's very pleased that he's made a great recovery. But he has also been a pantomime villain at Watford at times, and Tony Coton even responded to a point whereby he'd rung him up before Watford played Luton and said, I'm gonna beat you, and I'm gonna put three past you," and he did, and he basically kind of more or less took Coton out at one stage as well. But they are as close can be, and that comes from their time at St Andrews.
Yeah, and we had. I was lucky enough to attend an event which was Tony, Mick Harford, Noel Blake, and
don't start the fight anytime soon.
What stories, is absolutely unbelievable. And I mean, he's a true gent, and I should say, I know he listens to these, so Tony, I hope you're recovering well from your operation and that all went well. So hope to see you not only back at St Andrews, but no doubt down at Watford in the near future as well. So get well soon there.
Absolutely, only man to win Player of the Season 3 times, and I think he did it consecutively as well. No messing about.
I remember him fondly telling us that at a Birmingham night, how he'd won it 3 times at Watford. So he had great pleasure in putting that one. And he also told us about his painting, which I believe is by the subway.
Yes.
Troy's on there as well, if I remember rightly.
Troy's on there as well. We do a lot of stuff with the guys from Merwells who do it. And if you haven't got any of these ones up at St Andrews, I don't know if you have, but they're fantastic. Football grounds can be in places that occasionally are a bit desolate, and having the splash of colour. I mean, we've got, he's on I call it like the underground, or the kind of underpass of legends. You've got Tommy Mooney, who obviously got another man.
I actually met Tommy Mooney last night. I was having a chat with him at St Andrews.
Tommy Mooney gave us 3.5 hours, and when we told him that Troy gave us 4, he went, "He only did that to beat my 3.5," which is everything you want to know. They're basically opposite each other on the wall, and then you go a little bit further up, and there's Tony as well. But hopefully, more will be planned, because we, like you, have got players that aren't necessarily the obvious national players or international players, but who've been legends at the club who deserve something. And these murals are one, as I say, they're hugely colourful, but they also instigate conversation between the older and the younger generation, and almost get people going. So who'd be painted this time, in 10 years' time from this team. In answer to ours, not many, but there we go. We'll get onto that in a minute.
Well, I mean, before you go back just over the past 5 games, as a Birmingham fan, this is not pleasant reading and horrible to read out. But of the past 5 games, we have lost 4 of them and we drew 1. So the going into Saturday, it's all looking at thinking, oh God, is that number going to go up? And obviously we hope not. But the last time we played each other as well was the 2-0 loss down at Watford. But yeah, you've got one hell of a record against us, and one that over the years, and actually when Tommy Mooney joined us on the show, he was talking about Birmingham being one of those stadiums that when he came with the playoff semi-final, as it was, he went.
It's why he signed, absolutely.
It was intimidating. He was like, it was unreal going into that ground. He went, it was just a cauldron, and I think, as he described it, a cauldron of hatred, which we can do. Sadly, we are lacking at the moment, but we're on a bit of a downer. Hopefully, we can turn that around, as we'll come on to it at the weekend. And we've also mentioned there a couple of old players, but there's a fair few others actually that have crossed the divide, shall we say, between the two clubs, and the names are phenomenal with both clubs. So bit of a challenge for you here, and on the spot.
Go on then.
So you've mentioned Tony, you've mentioned Troy, but can you name 4 others that have played for both Birmingham and Watford, whether that be loans or permanent signings?
Oh, blimey. A personal favourite is always Paul Devlin.
Yeah.
Thought he was always he was tremendous at Watford. Again, he'd be one that I'd have up on the wall in a minute as a mural. But a lot of people might say no because he's kind of his tenure there. But a winger who actually had end product. Who knew there was such a thing? Let me think now. No, the brain's gone blank. I could probably name it in a bit, but let me think.
I'll give you some clues. I mean, there's been other goalkeepers. You know the goalkeepers. We've had defenders crossing the paths, midfielders, and obviously we've mentioned a couple of the strikers already.
Oh, Paul Furlong, obviously.
Yeah.
As well. I mean, Fuzzy was. He is right up there with my favourite player of all time, and he only played for us for 2 seasons, but was remarkably brilliant. So yeah,
one of the, if not, I still think the best goal scoring ratio to appearances at Birmingham.
Oh, yes, yeah. I mean, he had. I don't know what his ratio was there, but I remember doing before I joined the guys on Do Not Scratch. I was doing again a YouTube thing, and did a thing on him as an ex-player, and he was the first one I wanted to do. And his goal ratio at your place and at our place was brilliant. It was just unfortunately he had Chelsea in the middle, which was a jump too far for him at that time. No, you're gonna have to give me some more clues, and then I'll jump to them.
We'll go through. We'll go for the defenders first of all. So we go from.
David Holdsworth. Crying out loud, David Holdsworth, because he played in that straight away. I will get to them slowly, but
we've also got 2 others. So the way I described them, we've got a tall, no nonsense centre half who represented both clubs.
Tiny
Taylor.
Yeah.
And arguably total and utter fans' favourite of Birmingham. He represented Watford, he represented Birmingham, West Brom as a defender. He was captain, I think, of all 3 clubs.
Oh, God almighty. Yes, of course. Robbo,
indeed. And Paul Robinson, friend of the show as well. And we actually held a Q&A session with Paul and Michael Morrison just a couple of weeks ago, which was great fun.
Fantastic stuff.
Few others. So we've mentioned Tommy Mooney already. We've mentioned Troy Deeney.
How on earth did I go? I mean, I probably because I really, really loved Paul Devlin playing. When I think the money was put up by Elton John, and bearing in mind he's put the money up for Paul Devlin, and for Troy Deeney. He's not done bad for us as Elton, I think it's fair to say.
Not at all.
But for me to remember that before Robbo, I'm so sorry. Carl and Justin will give me a kicking when they see me.
We've had a few others though. Kevin Miller, Jermaine Pennant was on loan, I believe, with yourselves, as well as Birmingham. You've mentioned Devs, Jordan Much, Lloyd Dyer.
Dyer. I mean, much was good. He came to us on loan. He was okay. Lloyd Dyer didn't really fire, but then again, he had an absolute lunatic Italian manager. We have many managers. Some of them were bound to be lunatics. Several of them were also bound to be Italians. He ticked both boxes, called Sanino, and Lloyd Dyer scored against Rotherham. And rather than being happy about it, he just went over and basically gave Sanino both barrels. He was an absolute head case. Kevin Miller, again, only with us for 2 seasons, won the Player of the Season both seasons. Him, and of course, Ben Foster. With you guys as well, who also won it twice, was in danger at one point of getting it a third time, but I think I think Tony Coton took him out with a sniper rifle at that point. That was fine.
Well, I mean, a couple of others that I'll be honest, I totally forgot about, and one in particular is Diego Fabrini. He came from yourself and joined obviously ourselves and had a good time when he was there. And then the other one, he's one that's probably not as renowned across both clubs, but Jerome Sinclair. So we've had quite a few that are
Sinclair failed to fire. Fabrini had a couple of wonderful moments, but he was either sublime and brilliant, or he looked like a competition winner. There was no two ways.
X factor. He was X Factor. He was. That's it's exactly the same at Birmingham. He would have an absolute phenomenal game, and then the next one you'd be thinking, where's he gone?
Where's he gone? Yeah,
why has he disappeared?
I remember Borough signing him for a bit, and I had a Borough friend at work, and he just kind of went, how have you let this guy go? He's absolutely amazing. I said, give him 3 games. I saw him 2 games later, and he was like, you can have him back. How he goes, isn't it?
And it's not just players, obviously, that we've got links with. So from a managerial side of things, most recently, Johnny Eustace. I know he didn't manage Watford, but a huge player for your club. Obviously, a Brummie by heart. Dare I say Cockney by nature? But that's what he was like. He was.
He was a captain fantastic for us. He was captain fantastic for us. I think he got sent off in his first game, which immediately endeared me to him, I'm sure, or the other way around, which was fantastic. And he was also, whilst he didn't manage, his final season at Watford, he was basically down with an injury. So he was another manager, obviously, which we'll go to, Zola. He played a big part in the dressing room in that year when the do not scratch your eyes goal was scored, which was the Pozzo's first ever season, where we suddenly had kind of 57 loanees from Italy, and then he was like going, what have we got here, what's going on? But he played a real part, and we've seen that also with people like you may have seen the tweet that went on last week. One of the guys who played a similar role was a guy called Dean Austin, who's now at Coventry, and Deanie called him out for playing that role, having somebody who's the domestic coach's voice, knows the division. It can kind of solidify all of the kind of the foreign elements and the domestic elements all together and kind of do a job. And that's what I think that probably would have helped certainly John Eustace in his early stages, because he was like QPR assistant manager, and we were always looking to hopefully get him to come back in. And I think it was him and Rob Edwards at the start of the not this season but the previous season who were up for it, and we went for Rob Edwards, who's now taken Luton into the Premier League. We won't talk about that.
And I mean, you've mentioned his name there. We've got to talk about Gianfranco Zola. So obviously he was the guy that took you so close. I think was the way he was at Watford was what we would have loved to have seen at Birmingham. But unfortunately, when he came, it just didn't fire. And in fact, when we go back over a fair few seasons now, the introduction and really the recruitment of Gianfranco Zola for me is part of the downfall of what we see at Birmingham as a club at the moment. We've only this season started to see things pick up with John Eustace starting the season, getting us up there, and then we go and sack him and replace him with a name that didn't work out. It was the same with Zola. He took over from Gary Rowett.
Yeah.
It was all very quick. So obviously things would have been in the pipeline already. He then had a transfer window where he splashed the cash on players that didn't work out for the club, unfortunately. And I think it partly himself, and he'll no doubt talk about it at some point, but I think he thought himself, look, it's time for me to move on. Otherwise, if he'd have stayed, that would have been Birmingham down. We have Harry Redknapp really to thank for staying in the league at that point in time once he'd gone. But we haven't really seen the Birmingham team fire as much as what it was prior to Zola's introduction until Eustace came in. And I think the work ethic that he brought to our club was huge. But the main thing that he did was he reunited the fans with the players and the club. He kind of brought everything together, and he was just a true gent and such a nice guy. And we were all shocked when he went. I don't believe it was a decision that was made overnight. I think that there was, again, probably times of discussion that had taken place, but it was a shock to see him go. And we're in the position we are now because we made that, for me, wrong decision.
Yeah.
Obviously got Tony Mowbray now, unfortunately.
Of course.
Poorly gent at the moment. But hopefully, from what I'm reading, we will see him back in the sidelines, hopefully within a couple of weeks, which will be lovely to see. But we're on a bit of a downward spiral. So we're going into Saturday off the back of I'm never lost for words, but I was lost for words on Tuesday night. So it really does show that they were poor. And
I'll to give your listeners some hope in this. In the last 8 games, we've lost 6. We drew against Swansea, and we beat Rotherham United with a single goal from the edge of the box. Because if you look at stats for goals from the edge of the box, and if you look at a show reel for Watford, it'll be like, oh my God, they're really good from shooting outside the box. We are, because we're not very good at getting in it. There's no quick give and goes, and that's why that sort of come as well. So it's going to be 2 teams. We are looking very much. I know we're sitting in 13th, but we are looking very much downward because our run after this is against teams who, in the the last 8 games performance league, if you will, are up there in the top 6. They're all firing, they're all going for it, etc. So, whatever happens at St Andrews, it's going to mean a lot to all parties. We're not going to be kind of coming along as a mid-table side who don't really care. We've just had the change of manager. We've now got Tom Cleverley in charge. So obviously we don't quite know what that's going to entail, but he said he won't change everything overnight. So if we carry on as we had done, it'll be a 4-3-3, or he might go to a 4-2-3-1 because we've got probably a squad to accommodate that better than we have 4-3-3, to be honest. But we've got a very, very thin skeletal almost squad. We've got 22 senior players. And when you get 3 or 4 of those injured, you're then kind of really struggling to fill the bench. Obviously bringing through youth players, we love to see it. We really genuinely do. But you normally want to do that from a position of strength rather than walking into what is absolutely a cauldron. At St Andrews, I've been there. I don't think I'd fancy being an away player there. And you let us know. Fair enough.
So we get to that interesting point. Just in the last couple of minutes now, around how you think the results will go at the weekend. It's interesting what you say there about the fact that the scoring from outside the box, not doing much inside the box. I can honestly say that Birmingham have done neither. So if that's the case, and we limit your shots from outside the box, then we're looking at a 0-0. Now, I don't think it's going to happen that particular way because we cannot keep clean sheets. But before I give you my prediction, what's yours?
Because of the change of management, it's very hard to know at this moment in time. We are hoping for a new manager bounce, which at Watford typically you get about once every 3 weeks, as I said. Except of course when you change as regularly as we have done, it doesn't work. This is our first change this season. That it was needed, it was overdue, and the squad that we've got, a lot of people had observed that they wanted to see the handbrake taken off. Because we've got some attacking talent, we've got some opportunity in there, but it was all a bit dour and it was all a bit kind of keeping the ball at the back for far too long. We will see kind of what Tom cleverly brings. I would hope that because we don't tend to keep clean sheets either, I'm going to hope that we win 2-1. I think it'll be close. Personally.
It's going to be a tough
and low
game.
Scoring.
It's going to be one where from a Birmingham point of view, we cannot afford to lose. I mean, I think if I remember rightly, looking at the fixtures, Huddersfield are playing Rotherham at Rotherham. Now, Rotherham by far are the worst team in the league. They are, I think anybody will say it now that they are gone. Huddersfield are fighting for their lives. Huddersfield have got to play Birmingham at Huddersfield. We've got to play Rotherham ourselves as well. We've got some massive teams or games, not teams, to play. I think going into Saturday, we've got to have a bounce. We have to have a bounce from Tuesday night. We cannot be any worse than what we were Tuesday night, simple as. I am hoping we see a bounce. If I was to make a prediction now, it's going to be a reversal of yours. I think, I could see us winning 2-1. We're not going to keep. I'll be amazed if we keep a clean sheet. And I
don't think either of us are set up to keep a clean sheet.
No, and I think the other thing is the fact we are paper thin as far as defence is concerned. So it's going to be another centre half partnership that we see on Saturday. I don't think we've had a settled one for more than 3 games. So it's going to be an interesting one. 2-1, I'll go, and hopefully. We come away with the 3 points. But the one thing I want to say is we're 2 big clubs, and it doesn't matter any rivalry or anything else. We both shouldn't be fighting to be staying in this league. We actually both should be in a situation where we're fighting to be in the Premier League. And I want Birmingham to be back up there, and I'd love to see Watford back up there as well. I think it's great crack. It's a lovely game when I have been down to Watford. Do enjoy the banter between the fans, and it's always a good laugh. So let's hope that we're both in the same league next season, and we can do this again.
No, absolutely. I and obviously many Watford fans still have memories of when we would play you, and Troy Deeney. We started with him. Let's kind of finish with him in this respect. Yeah. He would wander over to the Blues fans and throw his boots into the Blues fans because, as I said at the start, he turned around and he said, I'm a Blue Nose. You get your team. What did he say? You get your team allocated before you even know it. He said, but then at Watford, I've been there so long, and he was there kind of man and boy. It was nice when he did come down. I appreciate his time for you. We played Chelsea, and he came down one night because you didn't have a game because he didn't get a chance to say goodbye. Kind of to the actual fans. When he did, he left he did a video, and we talked about it to him the other night, and because he was an absolute talisman for us for through some really really kind of tricky times when there wasn't a consistency of manager, and the one constant at Watford was Troy, and of course he was leaving to you guys, and everybody, well, at least the vast majority of people, turned around and went, he's going back to his boyhood club, we hope it works for him. And there were supporters of a certain age for whom it genuinely felt like a loss of somebody in the family, and we missed his impact in the dressing room, because depending on who you talk to, he was either the root of all player power and evil kind of thing, or he was the one who set the standards. And every time I speak to somebody from Brum, they tend to turn around and say, well, his kind of problem was that he didn't necessarily appreciate that he wasn't coming into quite the same standard of player, but he was demanding the same thing. So, we have missed a Troy Deeney character in that dressing room more than I think we appreciated at the time. And it's just nice to know that he's not the only thing we've got in common, because
No,
it's
definitely.
always, we always say it's opposition, not enemy. So
Exactly. Well, I'm going to sign off as I do with all groups and say good luck to you for the rest of the season. But I hope you have the worst game possible on Saturday. And thank you very much for your time. And right on.
cheers, guys. Take care.